Hi, how you doing? Justin here. In this lesson today we're going to be checking out a thing called the Tritone Substitution, which is a jazz chord substitution theory. In previous lessons I've already discussed a functioning dominant, and if you don't understand that concept then you need to go and check that lesson out now, or this won't make very much sense at all. It's probably a good thing if you understand the altered scale and altered harmony as well, actually. So the basic idea here is that when a dominant seventh chord is functioning, i.e. going to its one chord, it can be substituted by a dominant chord that is a tritone or an augmented fourth away from its root. So what that would mean in a regular chord sequence that went D minor 7, G7, C, if the G7 is functioning and going to the C, which it is in this case, you can substitute the G7 with a D flat 7 chord, which changes kind of the general kind of harmony a little bit, but the sense of form of the melody remains the same. Let me play that for you so you can hear what I'm talking about. This would be D minor 7, G7, C major 7, and the substitution would be D minor 7, D flat 7, C major 7. If I play those one after each other now with a little bit of rhythm. You can hear that they're really quite interchangeable. Now, the reason for this is really simple, and once I show it to you, you'll kind of go, oh yeah, that, you know, it's quite logical kind of pathway, this. And it's a very usable substitution. Other, Coltrane substitutions are a bit more complex and you have to be a bit more wary of them. This one works most of the time, remembering, of course, though, the golden rule, which is that if it sounds good, it is good, and if it sounds shit, it is shit. So don't go playing ones if you try it and you play it and it doesn't sound good, don't use it. Just because there's a music theory rule that says it's okay, doesn't mean it's okay. You have to listen, you have to use your ears, and you have to suss out when you can use a particular idea and when you can't. So the basic idea here, if we think of our G7 chord, the important notes in our G7 are the root, the flat seventh and the third. The root note of a G7 being the note G, the flat 7 being the note F, and the third being the note B. And it's this tension created between the F and the B that resolves to the C. Happy, tense, nasty, oh, happy. Now because of that we can add extra tension in, which is where we come to those altered chords, or that's where that kind of altered harmony came from. Now, the interesting thing, and I think it's pretty funky, is that this F and the B, which were the flat 7 and the third of the chord G7, are the flat 7 and the third of another chord, which is D flat 7. Here, G7, change the root note from G to D flat, and we end up with a D flat 7. D flat being the root, the F note is now the third of D flat, and the note B is now the flat 7 of D flat. It's kind of really, I guess, a C flat note, but C flat and B are the same thing. Yeah, they're pretty similar. Let's go to a close-up of this because I think it's a really good idea to be able to visually see this relationship and not just understand it. Here is our G7 chord. We've got here the note G, F, and B. Root note, flat 7 and third. Now if we just change, we keep that the same actually, and then we just move the root note over to here, which is now a D flat, you can see there's G, D flat. These two notes are exactly the same, and here now we've got D flat, F, which is now the third of D flat, and C flat or B, which is the flat 7. So you can see quite simply here D minor, G7, C, or D minor, D flat 7, C. Well, hopefully now this concept is making sense both visually intellectually and audibly, that you can hear the change is a nice substitute. You understand why we can make the substitution, and you can see the substitution on the neck. The fun for this really starts when we start to look at the chord extensions as well. Now, this part might make your brain hurt a little bit, but if you try and remember back to our functioning 5 chords, we also looked at the altered scale, which told us that if a dominant chord was functioning, i.e. going to the 1, that we could add in extensions of sharp 5, flat 5, sharp 9 and flat 9, which gave us all of this funky harmony. And all of that came together to form a scale called the altered scale. So that was the A flat melodic minor scale, but starting on G. So it's kind of the 7th mode of the A flat melodic minor scale, gave us G altered or G superlocrian, and that's where all of those kind of funky chords came from. That's the chord scale, if you like. Now, if we look at you're keeping the same notes but having the tonal center as D flat, i.e. now we're talking about another mode of the A flat melodic minor scale, we end up with a scale called the D flat Lydian dominant scale, which is a very funky scale indeed. It's the same as a Mixolydian mode, but it has a sharpened 4th degree. It's a very cool scale, one that I like using a lot in regular blues and stuff as well, not just jazz. Once we start looking at that scale, because it's got a sharp 4, which is the same as a sharp 11, we can't use any chords that, like D flat chords that have an 11th. We have to use a sharp 11. So this is quite intense, this kind of theory. Now, I'm not expecting you to understand it just from me saying that once. This stuff really generally needs to be read. So I'm going to make sure that I put the theory for this up on the website. Go and check out the jazz section of the website, and I'll have some notes there for you to study to help make this a little bit easier. General gist, when you do a tritone substitution, the new chord, you can play a dominant 7th, a 9th, or a 13th, but you can't play an 11th. If you want to play an 11, you have to play a sharp 11. So what I'd suggest you get into now is trying to plug this into some 2-5-1s and or putting it into some jazz standards that you know. So if we just look at our regular 2-5-1 in C, D minor, G7, C, we could try doing D minor 7, D flat 7 to C major 7. We could try going D minor 7 to D flat 9 to C major 7. We could go D minor 9, D flat 9 to C major 9. We could try going D minor 9, got an F in the bass this time, but still D minor 9, to a D flat 13 to a C major 6-9, C6-9. That's all just in that position, but you could do, of course, do it up here. So you could have D minor 7, D flat 13, C major 7. There's an infinite number of possibilities here, and it's something that you really have to start exploring yourself. I'm not doing close-ups, I'm not doing too much stuff on this because it's really important now, if you're at the point where you're doing this kind of advanced jazz stuff, that you figure out things and figure out chords for yourself, figure out voice leadings by yourself. I will show you some, of course, I have done, but I think it's really important too that you kind of intellectually start to explore these concepts, or they'll never really make sense. So, have a go now, see how many different ways you can put this tritone substitution into a standard that you know. Just pick, I don't know, Autumn Leaves or All the Things You Are or whatever, you know, basic standard that you know, and see how many different times you can fit this tritone substitution in. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun, learn a lot. Do check out the website and check out the kind of the paperwork, because that will help you make sense out of all of this mumbo jumbo. I'll see you for some more jazz stuff sometime very soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.